Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Leadership Trail Mix. Before we kick off today's reflection itself, I have to acknowledge that March is when we celebrate Women's History Month. This March, I had the opportunity to see, read, and hear from many amazing women, and two situations in particular had a great impact on me. A LinkedIn post by a former colleague called Heidi Myers that for me was the perfect description of what I saw taking place when Linda Bethay, head of marketing for a large CPG company in North America, shared the stage with her daughter Finley for a fireside chat during a marketing event a few days ago. The posting, which was a quote Heidi once heard, said, "We are raising a generation of children who will grow up to believe they can do anything in this world. Why? Because they watch their mothers do it." With these words that confirm my belief that representation matters, I want to say thank you to all the women in my life and publicly commit to continue being an advocate and champion to help drive what the theme of this year's Women's History Month was: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, into our reflection. Okay, but how are you really? These 6 words echoed in the room where I was having a regular chat with a leader, and the silence was filled with a "good question," which was then followed by tears. It was as if that leader had been numb. You know, when you go to the dentist and get so much anesthetics that you could bite half of your tongue off and not feel a thing? I was there, watching the anesthetics effect fade away and the pain hit full strength. That leader was not okay, but not surprisingly, they were numb by crazy busyness and didn't realize it until that simple question. Those ordinary 6 words woke them up. And then, their awakening woke me up to the fact that I could not expect that leader to take care of their own team or even have the sensibility to recognize in others what they were not able to recognize on themselves. Sounds familiar? I wish it didn't, but I guess it does, either for yourself or for someone you know. In today's reflection, we'll be talking about emotional intelligence, a term coined back in 1990, but that is so current and that I see so many people refer to, but I don't think we all understand. We'll be mostly drinking from the book Optimal by Daniel Goleman and Cary Lenz. Daniel was the person who coined the term emotional intelligence, so Optimal is the evolution of it, with the authors kindly providing a great overview of the fundamental principles of emotional intelligence. Well, let me start by saying that I get it. We live in a society that tends to minimize feelings, call tears drama, and explain in objective terms what is completely subjective, as if trying to strip away from us what makes us humans and differs from robots. So while what we do can be, and many times is, very objective, how we do it is very subjective. The concept of emotional intelligence was built upon this truth, which wasn't articulated this way back then, but it's now in the book Optimal. Here's my take on it. As social beings who live in society, there is an optimal way of doing things, an optimal way of relating to ourselves, which is a piece we often neglect, but a key one for our success as people leaders, and there is also an optimal way of relating to each other. The bad news is that the definition of optimal will be different for each of us. So, if you're already grabbing your apron and expecting a Julia Child recipe ending with a bon appetit, I don't have it for you. The good news, though, is that there is a framework for what emotional intelligence is and how to increase it, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. A recent survey from Korn Ferry says that roughly 6 out of 10 leaders fall short in emotional intelligence. I don't want to be one of them, and I hope you don't either, so let's start from the beginning, a definition. Emotional intelligence is about suppressing your emotions and being nice all the time. I was just checking if you're paying attention. That's exactly what emotional intelligence is not. It's not about suppressing emotions or being nice. The best definition I found is the one from a LinkedIn page called Infographics Insights. Infographics Insights recently published the Ultimate Emotional Intelligence one-pager for leaders, and they defined it, and here I quote, "the capacity to recognize, understand, manage, and use emotions in ourselves and others to foster positive interactions and decision-making." I love the 4 action verbs used here. recognize, understand, manage, and use. It gives us two pairs of words to then approach the framework I mentioned earlier. The first pair refers to the work of awareness, and the second pair refers to the work of management. Both awareness and management can be self or other focused, and they are equally important if we want to be emotionally intelligent leaders. But today we'll only be looking at the part of it related to ourselves. We need to recognize and understand our emotions. The Greek philosopher told us so in the 4th century BC. Noti siauton, which is Greek for know yourself, or in the context we are looking at today, be self-aware. Let's be honest, easier said than done, right? In my work in HR, I've seen so many people fail to know themselves, and a lot of times it was because they actually didn't want to. Looking at your reflection in the mirror, recognizing your qualities, your opportunities, and most importantly, your feelings, all of this takes a lot of work, and the type of work we can't do alone. Why? Because our brain does everything it can to avoid pain, including lying to ourselves about who we truly are and our impact on those around us. So developing self-awareness will inevitably require feedback from others. A few months ago, I was talking to someone at a wedding, and I was surprised to hear, "Oh, you know when you say this word using this tone? It makes it as clear as water that you are irritated." Wait, what? No, I'm not always irritated. Gosh, you're right. Most of the times I said that when I am irritated. I just didn't think people could pick up on it. But I also say it when I'm not irritated, so if people are still picking up on it, then we have a disconnect between my intent and my impact, and only input from someone could help me here. I would dare to say that the hardest work is the one we have to do on our own. Pay a lot of attention to how you feel about things, the impact feelings have on our actions, and how we can manage them. All right, let's play a game here. How many emotions can you name? If you feel like it, hit pause, take your time, count it. I'll be here waiting. Otherwise, here's what Google told me. Of course, depends on the theory, but the one I like the most is the one created by Plutik, who says we can experience 34,000 unique emotions. Overwhelming itself, huh? I know. The good news is that it seems that Plutik also thought so, because he also said that ordinarily we experience 8 primary emotions, which, as they increase and decrease in intensity, will have different names. He organized them in a wheel, and I strongly encourage you to Google it. But thinking about the 34,000, can you imagine how many times you felt one of them and either didn't know how to name them or just mislabeled what you were feeling? Can you imagine how powerful it would be if you could precisely say, "I'm feeling X"? And taking it to the next level, can you imagine the power of being able to follow "I'm feeling X" with, "and I'm feeling so because of Y"? If we are able to name our emotions and understand why a certain thing makes us feel a certain way, we can then do something about it. And even if we can't pinpoint why we are feeling a certain way, if we're able to identify what it is that we are feeling, that can help us use our emotions for good. Let me try to explain. Have you ever interacted with someone or watched them interact with someone else and think to yourself, "No way they don't know what they're doing. That was mean. They didn't see coming. They went from 0 to 1,000 miles in 3 seconds." Well, most times things actually happen gradually and then suddenly, but not always. There are things that have the power to trigger us, to make emotions blind us and make us act in a very irrational way. Identifying these things and the feelings associated with them is key if we want to develop our emotional intelligence. And then, once we understand and recognize, we'll be able to manage and use emotions in our favor. And here I want to be very practical and also add my own interpretation of the difference between manage and use. Manage for me is about feeling something and being able to talk ourselves off the ledge, mostly because we're able to pinpoint the why. It is about being able to have an internal dialogue that says, "This is not about me. I shouldn't let anger take over." Or, "Why am I feeling ashamed about this? This person is just providing feedback to me and they are being very kind." That is, in my opinion, different from using emotions, which for me is when you don't know the why. You just know that there is a feeling, and because you lack the ability to name it, and probably the why behind it, you can't manage it. You can just use it to stop you from losing control or disrespecting your limits. In other words, here I'm talking about getting into your soapbox and not knowing how you ended up in there, but knowing that if you don't use that emotion as a warning, you will cross the red light and there might be a crash and victims. Do you see where I'm going here? Self-awareness when it comes to emotions is a huge advantage to either keep us on track or to make us stop. Yes, you can stop. There is nothing wrong about saying, I'm sorry, can we continue this conversation later? I don't think I'm ready for this discussion yet. Or, sorry, I know that if we continue this debate now, I won't be able to show up as my best self. We can do that, leaders. And while I know I said that I would focus on ourselves and not on others, I can't help it but say that if we develop the ability to recognize emotions in ourselves, it will likely increase our ability to recognize emotions in others too. And then being able to say, sorry, it seems that this conversation is triggering some emotions for you. Do you want to stop here and reconvene later? Or when in front of a team member that didn't see their emotional red light and crossed it, you can be the one that stops and says, sorry, I value our relationship too much to let emotions compromise it. I'm sensing an emotional reaction from you that I think can derail this conversation, so we are not continuing it today. That, in itself, has the potential to calm things down and de-escalate a tense situation, even if it means having to leverage your authority for the greater good. Hopefully this is making some sense and we are leaving this reflection with some ideas and tools. For the call to action today, can we spend some time reflecting on a recent situation where you crossed the red light and let your emotions crash and burn? What were you feeling? Why were you feeling that way? What were the signs that could have allowed you to manage or use your emotions in a more productive way? What have you learned from it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just email me at miguel@leadershiptrailmix.com. The 3 first people to share their thoughts with me will get the audiobook by Daniel Goleman and Cary Lenz, Optimal, which was one of the resources of inspiration for this episode. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. Take care and talk soon.